And that is just not borne out in the research.
Thank you. I've picked up that Professor Stanko and Dr. Smith want to come in. But before I come to them, can I just ask you, so if I've read your research correctly, you're saying about one out of every jury has some form of presumption around rape and sexual assault. I may have that wrong. Please do correct me if you're nodding away. So,
so what I'm saying is what the research showed was that the small proportion of serving jurors who held factually incorrect views in relation to rape and sexual offences amounted to less than one person on a jury. So, for instance, if 3% of over 1,000 jurors held or believed in a rape myth or a stereotype, that's going to be less than one person on any one jury.
My apologies, that was my poor reading of your excellent research. But just on that point, a judge obviously has the ability to explain more around these issues to the juries. When that happens, do you find, when in your studies, have you found that that has impacted that less than one jury member and changed their views, or are you seeing that that figure holds out whether the judge intervenes or not?
That's the second part of my research, which is currently ongoing. But what I would say is I think it's very important to point out that judges have the ability to direct juries in relation to rape myths and stereotypes. They have had this ability for a number of years. They receive training on this in serious sexual offences training that they all undergo. The Crown Court Benchbook Compendium provides sort of sample directions for judges depending upon the particular circumstances. And those directions to the jury cover a wide range of issues, from whether it's the way someone's dressed or behaved, whether it's a question of whether it was a late report, a delayed report, whether it's about the level of emotion that's displayed when giving evidence. So all of those are provided to juries by judges in their directions. The one thing that I did highlight in my research in the report was there were two particular issues where there was, we found enough uncertainty on the part of jurors to suggest that they may benefit from additional guidance. And one of them in particular, two issues, which was whether you were more likely to be raped by a stranger than someone you knew. The overwhelming majority of jurors believed correctly that you were more likely to be raped by someone that you knew, but there were enough jurors who were confused, who said they weren't sure, to indicate that better guidance might be helpful. And also the issue of the level of emotion that would be displayed when giving evidence in court about a rape. Jurors were very split about this, almost equally split about the extent to which they thought someone would necessarily be emotional when giving evidence about a rape, those compared to those who were uncertain and those who felt that it wasn't necessarily the case. So all of those two issues do indicate that perhaps some additional guidance might be helpful in that.
Thank you, and I will bring you in. Just one last question on that particular piece. And do you have any comparative data across other offences? So is this level of presumption unique to rape and sexual assault, or do you know if we're seeing it in other areas as well?
Do you mean the extent to which jurors may have believe certain myths and stereotypes in
yes.
The only comparative research that I've done is in relation to race of the defendant. So we've done a very extensive amount of research going back to research that was commissioned post the Stephen Lawrence inquiry to look at whether there was any direct or indirect discrimination in the jury system. And again, we've looked at every single jury verdict in every court in the country over 13 years, and there is no significant difference in the jury conviction rate based on the race of the defendant. We've looked at the extent to which individual jurors may hold particular stereotypes in relation to defendants and their race. And again, there's no consistent pattern of discrimination that occurs there. So I think both of those are probably very surprising to people, but certainly the very detailed analysis on jury verdicts, I think, confirms what jurors are actually saying to us post-verdict.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, you wanted to come in.
Thank you. I'd just like to reiterate that Professor Thomas's work is really groundbreaking in terms of being able to speak to people who've been on a jury, and I think it would be great to see that widened out to other researchers. It's really important. There are a number of questions that I think her methodology raises, which I will submit in written evidence because it's too long here, and I know that you might have other questions. But the most important thing I think is to recognise that there is a difference between abstract and applied myths. So what we can see in research from Canada, New Zealand, there's a PhD study going on at the moment by Charlotte Herriot, is that, and my own research actually, and Vanessa Monroe and Louise Ellison's, is that people might have, when asked a survey, do you believe in this, or how accurate is this? They would say it's not, or I'm not sure. But actually they would then in conversation still bring those things up. And so there is something that we need to do. And unfortunately, Cheryl wasn't allowed to look at, to talk to people about their verdicts. Obviously not everybody was a sexual offence case, because of the laws here. That means that we don't know what was happening in those courtrooms. We don't know whether, we know that people know not to say yes or no. We don't know what is happening in that deliberation. And I'll send some research that actually unpacks that a little bit more. But I think it's important also to say it's not just about outcome. We want due process. We want a fair procedure. And regardless of whether or not it impacts on the jury, we don't want to be seeing rape myths brought up. And that is something that we do see. So significant amounts of relatively small scale research is actually really consistent over time and place that rape myths are being brought up, as well as wider stereotypes such as racism and stuff around migration status and gender and sexuality. And so even if those have no impact on the jury, those are not fair procedure, and therefore we need to make sure that they are addressed. But I'll send everything in more detail. Yeah.